Not because it's close to the end, but because I really like that Kaddish Shalom. It's the Hasidic Kaddish, and it's beautiful. It sounded like it was a slightly different arrangement this year. A little, I loved it. The word, oh, good Yantiv. The word for connection in Hebrew is kesher. It is very closely related to another Hebrew word, tiksharet, which means communication. In this season of information overload, when there's no such thing as a news cycle because it never stops, and when people are feeling less connected to one another as they withdraw behind electronic screens like this, it's not Mukser because it's just a piece of paper. And social media, I'm very concerned that real communication is not increased, but rather diminished, and we don't make real connections. Over these high holy days, we're going to address issues of connection. Tomorrow, on the first day of Rosh Hashana, we explore the connection to our dreams and aspirations for both Israel and for America. What was the original Zionist dream of Herzl, first articulated 120 years ago at the first Zionist Congress? How's it morphed through the Balfour Declaration 100 years ago, to the partition plan 70 years ago, and then the Six-Day War 50 years ago, all taking place in this year of 2017. And what of the American dream? We will explore what those original dreams were, perhaps to reclaim it. On the second day of Rosh Hashanah, with the backdrop of the binding of Isaac as our guiding Torah text, let's examine tiksharet, or communication, in the era of iPhones, Instagram, and Snapchat. What can we do to use effective communication to reconnect to one another, to reconnect in a time of isolating silos? Kol Nidre brings us to a most important topic of this high holy day season. How can we connect to friends and family struggling with mental health challenges? And how can we support the caregivers who are closest to those impacted? With the president recently declaring our opioid epidemic as a national crisis, it is appropriate to better connect to mental health well-being. Finally, just before Yizkor on Yom Kippur, I will address how we might better connect to our loved ones, a blessed memory. And to begin discussing the question, why does Judaism favor the anniversary of a death, yurtzites, over birthdays? But tonight, we connect to these high holy days. And what better way to start than by addressing the term itself, high holy days? If you were trying to explain to your supervisor, colleagues, teacher, or principal why you needed tonight, Thursday, Friday, and September 30th off for Yom Kippur, why you couldn't do homework on those days, and you told them it was because of high holy days, what would they think? The majority of you probably call it high holidays. And most normal non-Jews are thinking, great, a holiday, a time to celebrate. Definitely optional. Holy day is different than holiday. The word holy in Hebrew is kadosh. You know it. Kadosh, 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 right? It means set apart, sanctified, not to be used in an ordinary manner. Rather than, in Hebrew we call it yamim noraim. Rather than high, noraim means awesome. And not the colloquial way we use it these days, like awesome, dude, I'm right from the valley. But no, we don't mean it like that. It's become way too awesome, the word awesome. What makes high holy days so high or awesome? Well, the answer to that question is multi-layered. And I will answer it from the perspective of history religion, and society. History. Our ancestors had experiences in two very different ancient cultures, which may have rubbed off on us when it comes to New Year celebrations. Of course, we were enslaved to Pharaoh for 400 years before God redeemed us. It turns out that after the summer flooding of the Nile, as the waters receded and the harvest was gathered, our Egyptian hosts held a New Year celebration to mark the successful harvest. There's enough in this experience to suggest that our Israelite ancestors brought this celebration with them out of Egypt when they departed on their 40-year exodus to the Promised Land. Then there was the destruction of the temple in 586 BCE and our subsequent enslavement in Babylonia. We had a full 70 years to soak in their culture before the Persians freed us and allowed our ancestors to return home and build the second commonwealth in Judea. One of the celebrations the Babylonians had was their autumn Akitu festival, and with its annual enthronement of their god as king. Not only that, but the derivation of the Hebrew month of Tishrei, the start of the month which contains Rosh Hashana and all the other major fall Jewish holy days, is Tishritu, which is ancient Akkadian for beginning. The Babylonians saw their Akitu festival as celebrating not only their god's kingship, but also the celebration of the beginning of the world. A little more history here, and please stay with me. The Jewish derivation of Rosh Hashana, the seventh month from the Hebrew month of Nisan, comes from Leviticus 23:5. Though it's not called Rosh Hashanah, but rather the memorial of the sounding of the horn of sacred meeting. Not very catchy, is it? The sacrifices for that day are further described in Numbers 29:1-6. It is not until the year 220 of the Common Era that we first get the actual name Rosh Hashanah. And guess what? It's marked by celebrating the birthday of the world and the kingship of God, Malkei HaMlachim, the King of Kings. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Perhaps we can look at the Jewish calendar as having not one, but two Jewish New Years. The first in the spring, Nisan, and it's particular to the Jewish people, celebrating the moment we became a free people. Then, just as we celebrate the Shabbat on the seventh day, right? So in the seventh month, we celebrate the new year for years, Rosh Hashanah, as the birthday of the world, a universal celebration impacting all people. From a historical perspective, what makes High Holy Days so high is its connection to ancient Egypt and Babylonian cultures, which created our connection to a fall New Year's festival of cosmic proportion. Okay, the religious perspective. What makes the High Holy Day so high is its other name. Not exclusively Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, but rather the more ominous Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. It was the rabbinic understanding that on this day, the book of life would be open, and God would evaluate our deeds to determine if we would be inscribed in that book for a good year. We get the full force of this perilous time from the prayer found in our Musaf afternoon liturgy, which has taken on a lot more meaning these recent days, Unatana Tokef, where the cantor and the choir will sing, who will live and who will die, who by fire and who by water. And the punchline is, but charity, repentance, and prayer can avert the severity of the decree. It is not a slam dunk, my friends. Even if you do the right thing, you might still have a horrible outcome. But righteous living can make things a little easier for us. It is not only the gravity of the High Holy Days liturgy which is supposed to inspire teshuvah, or repentance. It is also the inclusion of multiple shofar blasts, unique melodies, some haunting and others joyful, even the Torah scrolls attired in white mantles, All of it is meant to shock the system, inspire introspection. Ironically, the rabbis looked at Yom Kippur not as a sad day or even as an austere day, but rather as a very happy day. There's a certain assumption that if we actually made it to Yom Kippur, it was assumed we were inscribed in the book of life and all would be well. It is not just Rosh Hashana, nor is it Yom Kippur, which are called Yamim Noraim, the high holy days. True, we're only asking for those 3 days off from school or work, but it is truly all 10 days, including the Jewish New Year, the Day of Atonement, and all the days in between, which are considered Yamim Noraim, because God is considering our fate on all these days. Okay, by a show of hands, how many of you have made well-intentioned secular New Year's promises on January 1st only to have broken them by February 1st? Come on. Yeah, all right. That is why our secular New Year cannot be compared to the Jewish New Year. That is also why, in part, we need the entire 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. These extra 10 days allow for contemplation and renewal, which might just allow us to make real change possible if we use the time wisely. It is during the Yamim Noraim, these awesome days, when we contemplate some of our real faults. We are too judgmental, selfish, stingy, fearful, angry, sad, shallow, vengeful, disrespectful, timid, insensitive, proud, and not in a good way. From a religious perspective, what makes High Holy Day so high is that our very fate is being considered for good or for ill, that we take time to reflect and make the needed changes, and that we share responsibility for helping to make each other better and for improving our society as a whole. My High Holy Days theme is about the importance of connection, or kesher. So it is from a society perspective that High Holy Days is truly so high. I recently heard a TED Talk. No, it's not a guy named Ted who does all the talks. I used to think that. But rather, TED, a friend tells me, stands for Technology, Engineering, and Design. 3 things I know absolutely nothing about. The TED Talk I heard was given by the former chief rabbi of England, Lord Jonathan Sacks. He discussed how we can face the future without fear by facing it together. Rabbi Sacks said he had a friend in Washington who he asked, "What was it like being in America during the recent presidential election?" The friend replied, "Well, it was like a man sitting on the deck of the Titanic with a glass of whiskey in his hand, and he's saying, 'I know I asked for ice, but this is ridiculous.'" Not with his rabbinic credentials, but as an observer of humanity, Rabbi Sacks began to make the case for social bonding to face our fears. He said, and I'll try to say it like him, "Biologically, we're social animals. We've spent most of our evolutionary history in small groups. We need those face-to-face interactions where we learn the choreography of altruism and where we create those spiritual goods like friendship and trust and loyalty and love that redeem our solitude. When we have too much of the I and too little of the we can find ourselves vulnerable, fearful, and alone. It is no accident that Sherry Tuckle of MIT called the book she wrote on the impact of social media, Alone, Together. Here's another way to look at it. If in the word illness we replace the I with we can change illness to wellness. Rabbi Sachs advises, it's in those face-to-face encounters that we discover that people not like us are just people like us. And actually, every time we hold out the hand of friendship to somebody not like us, whose class or creed or color is different from ours, we heal one of the fractures of our wounded world. That is the us of relationship. Although Rabbi Sachs was speaking to a general audience, listening to him with a Jewish ear, you might almost hear the Kabbalistic phrase tikkun olam in his recommendation for face-to-face encounters. Rabbi Sachs finishes his TED Talk by quoting the most moving phrase of the 23rd Psalm. Please, you can say it with me. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. We can face any future without fear, so long as we know we will not face it alone. Along these lines is the fact that so many of you, observant and not so observant, born Jews, Jews by choice, intermarried, gay, straight, trans, Asian, white, black, brown, with debt, without debt. Is there anybody without debt? Without debt, all of you find your way to Congregation Beth Shalom on high holy days. You create this mega minyan, which will exceed 1,000 people by noon tomorrow, and certainly at Saturday's Yom Kippur service, with services running simultaneously on this floor, the family service on the lower floor, and the 0 to 5 service up in the upper floor of the Hebrew school, all in one building. You make high holy days high just by showing up in such large numbers. It is impossible to feel we are facing the future alone when we are together in such a multitude. From my place up here on the bima, looking out, quite frankly, it's so exhilarating. There's so much energy in this room, and it's all coming from you. It's impossible to translate this experience to someone who is not here. Well, we're grateful for live stream, of course. But hopefully, in the days ahead, you will reach out to others who are gathered here. Celebrate old friendships, and perhaps reach out to someone across the aisle and make some new friendships as well. The power of relationships is transformative. Let us harness that energy for good as we endeavor to have the highest high holy days possible. Shana Tova.